Welcome all. Good evening to everyone. And we're going to call this meeting to order. And we're going to ask our esteemed council member, Lewis Jones, for the invocation.
Let's bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we know that you are always near us and beside us in all that we do. We ask that you be with us this evening as we consider the affairs of this our great city. Guide us and direct us in what we do and as we say. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Everyone present.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, now we're going to ask for a motion for certification of the closed session. We have a motion and a second. Okay, can we call the roll on the vote?
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Lucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood? Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11-0, you certify the closed session to be in accordance with the motion to recess.
Okay, I now call for approval of the following minutes. First, the informal and formal sessions of April 20th, 2021, special session on April 21st, 2021, special session, regularly scheduled workshop, April 27th, 2021, and the special session public hearing on the proposed real estate property tax of April 27th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, and we have the vote, please.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Lucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11-0, you've approved the minutes as submitted.
Okay, I'm proud to have a couple of presentations tonight. The first one is going to be the Historic Preservation Month, and representing is Dr. Stephen Mansfield, historian, Princess Anne County, Virginia Beach Historical Center, and archivist and vice president for the Academic Affairs, and Kenneth R. Perry, Dean of the College Emeritus, Virginia Wesleyan University. Welcome. And I am proud to read this for Historic Preservation Month. Whereas the National Trust for Historic Preservation created Preservation Week in 1993 to spotlight grassroots efforts in historic preservation in America. And whereas President Richard M. Nixon signed a resolution designating the week of May 6 to May 12, 1973 as National Preservation Week. And whereas the National Trust expanded the celebration to a month-long observance in 2005. And whereas states and communities across the country now recognize the month of May as Historic Preservation Month. Whereas the Princess Anne County Virginia Beach Historical Society was chartered as the Princess Anne County Historical Society in 1961 and has actively worked to preserve the county's and the city's history for the past 60 years. Whereas the Historical Society's mission is to foster awareness and stimulate interest in the history of Princess Anne County and Virginia Beach, and to encourage the citizens of the community in the preservation and restoration of historic properties within the city. And whereas the Historical Society's mission is also to develop programs for the interpretation of the community's heritage and the stewardship of historical resources. And whereas the Historical Society has been active in the preservation of the Pembroke Manor and Upper Messner houses. And whereas Virginia Beach has 22 individual historic properties, including Pembroke Manor and Upper Messner, listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And whereas the City of Virginia Beach City Council establishes the Historic Preservation Commission in 2008 to advise them on all issues related to the preservation of historic buildings, structures, and sites in the city. And whereas the City of Virginia Beach was designated as a certified local government by the National Park Service in 2016, recognizing that Virginia Beach has put the key elements of a sound preservation program in place for our community. And whereas in 2020, the City of Virginia Beach completed a citywide archaeological assessment and a citywide archaeological resources survey update in 2020, and whereas the Mayor and City Council support the preservation of the Virginia Beach's diverse and rich heritage and historic resources. Therefore, I, Robert M. Dyer, Mayor of the City of Virginia Beach, do hereby proclaim May 21st Historical Preservation Month in Virginia Beach, and furthermore call upon all citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses and schools in Virginia Beach to recognize the importance of historic preservation in maintaining the historical identity of the city and to commemorate this month with appropriate activities. For that, we thank you. We are extremely grateful.
Mayor Dyer, members of council, thank you very much. When the Historical Society was organized in 1961, we were just months away from the election within Princess Anne County and the oceanfront community of Virginia Beach, as you may recall, that would lead to the creation of the modern city of Virginia Beach. And so the Historical Society and the city have really grown together over the years. Early on, it was evident that the city was going to be growing very, very rapidly. Hard to imagine that within 19 years of the formation of the city, Virginia Beach would be the largest city in Virginia by population, and that several times we would be the fastest growing city. But that pace of growth represented a challenge for the Historical Society as thousands of new residents were moving in, and as millions, ultimately, of visitors were coming to the city. The task of how to interpret and celebrate our heritage and to make it meaningful both in terms of general information and even as a contribution toward context for policymaking. The Society elected not only to support historic preservation of structures, but also to engage in programming that would be both uplifting and celebratory. For example, the Upper Messner house that was referred to has become the headquarters for the Society and therefore represents a modeling for preservation, but it also can be celebrated as the residence in 1788 of one of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Richmond, at which Virginia ratified the United States Constitution. His vote was in favor, 5 votes the other way, and Virginia would not have ratified. Or to look at the challenges and opportunities represented by the uniqueness of being the largest city in a state, but also to have miles of coastal beaches and at one point the world's largest hog farm east of the Mississippi, and the degree to which those developments are a part of the story of the development of the community is among the programming foci of the Society. Might be noted that a Mrs. Burroughs in the 1890s wrote a letter to a family member in which she described a trip she had taken with her grandchildren down to the ocean front so that they could enjoy the beach and the water and get rid of the red ticks. Now, I suspect that the Visitors Convention Bureau is not likely to use that as a part of the celebration of what we have to offer modern-day tourists. The fact that we frequently go back in programming to the merger, to the details of that as a basis for how we envisioned ourselves emerging as a city is not only meaningful for us, but it turns out for others. For example, the County of Fairfax, which periodically considers transitioning to city status, has looked numbers of times to Virginia Beach as an example of how that transitioning might move. So for all of these many reasons, we are grateful for the support of the community as we have looked over 60 years of growth. And we thank you on behalf of all the members of the society and also the many volunteers of the other historic sites and the city employees who are responsible for historic preservation as well. We thank you for the honor provided by this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to recognize National Travel and Tourism Week with Nancy Hellman, Interim Director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, whereas established in 1983 by congressional resolution, National Travel and Tourism Week is an annual tradition during the first full week of May for the U.S. travel community to unite and recognize the value travel holds for our economy, businesses, and personal well-being. And whereas prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the travelism and tourism industry was a significant contributor to the U.S. economy and exports and supported millions of hard-working Americans of all backgrounds. And whereas in Virginia Beach, a workforce of more than 13,000 depends on the travel industry for their livelihoods, and our local economy depends on a vibrant tourism industry. Whereas National Travel and Tourism Week 2021 recognizes the power of travel and the industry's role in bringing back our vibrant communities, restoring the U.S. economy, rebuilding our workforce, and reconnecting America. And whereas this year we start a new chapter, one with the power of travel, will drive recovery and help define our country's way forward. And whereas, given the travel's critical role in job creation across the country, lawmakers at all levels should prioritize policies that are pro-connectivity, pro-growth, and pro-traveler. Therefore, I, Robert M. Dyer, Mayor of the City of Virginia Beach, do hereby proclaim May 2nd through 8th, 2021, National Travel and Tourism Week, and I encourage all citizens to observe this week and appropriate ceremonies and activities. Thank you,
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Please say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council, for proclaiming this week National Travel and Tourism Week here in Virginia Beach. We are proud this year to be partnering with the Virginia Beach Hotel Association and Virginia Beach Restaurant Association to create job opportunities within our hospitality businesses. As you are aware, the hotels and restaurants in Virginia Beach and across the nation are having a difficult time filling these much-needed positions. So tomorrow, the Hotel and Restaurant Associations, in partnership with the Virginia Beach CVB, are hosting a virtual job fair to staff up and support travelers and locals that are coming to Virginia Beach restaurants and hotels. In closing, I would like to personally thank you for always being so supportive of the travel and tourism industry, and thank you again for the proclamation this evening. We'll be sure to share it with our friends within the hospitality industry.
Thank you for everything you and your industry do for our great city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask Ms. Barnes, our distinguished city clerk, to read the instructions.
Thank you, Mayor. Today, we will have both in-person speakers and speakers participating via WebEx. To minimize risk due to the COVID-19 pandemic, limited seating will be available in Suite 5, with overflow seating available in Suite 4, where the meeting will be broadcast via WebEx. In-person speakers will be required to follow physical distancing and safety protocols, including wearing a mask while in the convention center. For ordinances and resolutions, I will recognize, we only have in-person speakers, so they'll be recognized first. For planning items, I will recognize the applicant or their representative first, whether they are in person or participating via WebEx. All other speakers will be recognized as previously stated. Speakers participating via WebEx, please mute any additional devices you have in the room to avoid any unnecessary echoing. It is important that once recognized, pause 2 to 3 seconds to ensure council hears your complete remarks. Please begin your comments by identifying yourself. Also, do not ask, "Can you hear me?" as only one feed is open at a time to minimize the echo, and as such, you will be unable to hear a response. Again, speakers will be recognized in the order which they are registered. Please note, if the speaker does not respond or if a technical issue occurs which renders the comments unintelligible, I will move on to the next registered speaker. Mayor and members of council, are there any questions about the process? Mayor Dyer, I'll turn the meeting back over to you to read the speaker rules and then begin moving through the published agenda.
Okay, I want to remind everyone that the City Council speaker policy that allows certain representatives of group to speak for 10 minutes applies only to planning items. All other speakers, whether speaking individually or on behalf of a group, will have 3 minutes to speak. Speakers are reminded that comments during the formal portion of the meeting must be limited to the subject of the item that is being considered by council at the time you are called. When speakers are called on each item, the clerk will call for those individuals who have signed up to speak. We have several items with only one speaker signed up. As such, the city clerk will call the speaker and identify each item that they have registered on. The speaker will receive 3 minutes to comment on each item. Again, the speaker must limit his or her comments to the subject matter of the items that have been signed up to address. Finally, I call upon all speakers and all persons in the chambers to be civil in their discussion and decorum. Whatever views you hold and wish to express, the City Council wants to hear from you and ensure that all viewpoints and all persons are respected. The best way to do this is for all of us to strive for civility and respect. Okay, Madam Clerk?
We have one speaker who signed up on all ordinances and resolution. Ms. Messner, if you'd come to the lectern.
Welcome, Ms. Messner.
Good evening. And during the invocation, I think it would be really nice to say something about the police officer that was injured. And, I hadn't heard anything. It's been 4 years, so I think we need to include a prayer for him. He's still recovering. It was 4 years ago. So our police do a great job, but they've been underfunded. So I just wanted to make that comment. Okay, and I listened to some of the back and forth, and I need to, it's just so frustrating that more people don't attend, but most of them have given up.
Okay, Ms. Messner,
Okay.
could
All
you?
right, this one is, it's due process. Okay, amend the city code for non-merit and merit employees. Okay, the FOIA I did on the city employees in 2018, there were 9,100. And after the mass shooting, there were only 7,500, and you're still losing. People are quitting, and it's not just the money, it's the hours, it's the overtime, and it's where they're assigned. They end up, so I'm opposed to amending the city code all the time when you haven't resolved any of the problems. Okay, 2, award 5,000 community services micro grant. 1 to a diaper bank and 1 to the Men of Faith Rhea basketball camp. You can't just pick certain people to help. You need to lower our taxes, make everything affordable for everyone. And our kids haven't been in school, and they have to join camps and pay to play at the sports center, which was I think 78 million. And there's no way that everyone shouldn't be able to play there for free. We paid for it. It shouldn't just be some group that Mr. Dyer is close with and certain youth. It should be all youths that play there. Okay? And on the subject of that, you know, the parking is a nightmare around here. And I saw in the notice that you don't plan to have anything. You plan to open up the beach and all this tourism.
Ms. Messner,
Okay.
if you could stick to the items.
I am. The parking next to the sports center, which is what this is about, using the sports center. They haven't completed the Tidewater Veterans Memorial there. That's still terrible, and you don't plan to have anything in person again for the third year for our vets or the mass shooting victims. Okay. For ordinance to authorize acquisition of property in fee simple right-of-way for temporary and permanent easements, either by agreement or condemnation. We have uncontrolled growth, horrible traffic, and you keep giving away right-of-ways. Mr. Moss brought something about people paying for it. But the bottom line is, our roads are deplorable, horrible, and traffic is a nightmare. So I'm opposed. Okay, 5, ordinance to authorize temporary encroachment in a portion of city-owned property at Lake Wesley to maintain an existing bulkhead construction and maintain proposed piles, boat lift, et cetera, for jet skis, floats, et cetera. So almost everything that you do is for tourism and to sell homes. So I'm opposed with these temporary encroachments. And I will mention the due process, because you're having meetings every single week, and it's back and forth whether we can come in person or not. And this is one of the things, you know, when the mayor calls for this, it says right here what your title is, Robert M. Bobby Dyer. That's how you ran. But down here, you just sign it Robert M. Dyer, Bobby Dyer, and there's no witness. It's the clerk's duty to witness all documents. It's not witness and, okay. So I'm opposed to the due process, lack of due process, and inability. You know, there are other people that would come if there weren't all the restrictions. Okay. 6, wait, let me make sure. 5, okay, 6. Appropriate $97,000 to provide an interest-free loan to Plaza Volunteer Rescue Squad to purchase a new ambulance. I don't know how many people are aware, but the citizens pay for EMS, all first responders, and we pay the Volunteer Rescue Squad. They have fundraisers. We pay for both. And the reason they might need new ambulances is because everyone's overworked. There's crashes, there's shootings. You know, it's insane what goes on in the city. The money's not going to fix anything. It's the policies. And on the subject of policies, no new debt, stop corporate welfare, stop restricted access to city government public beaches, public parks and roads, stop corporate welfare. That's where our money is going. That's what increases our debt. Stop taxing the poor and middle class for private developers and their pet banks. Stop new debt bonds, which is taxes. Abolish taxpayer-funded Virginia Beach Economic Development Authority, which takes out debt and you transfer our land to them so they can sell it to developers at a loss to us. Usually $1 a year lease. Recall mayor and council for failure to protect city employees and Virginia Beach citizens. Recall mayor and council for failure to balance and stick to a budget without debt for the past 20 years. Okay. 7, accept and appropriate $10,530 from Virginia Department of Forestry, Parks and Rec, operating budget, and authorize a local match Ray community tree planting initiatives. Parks and Rec take care of the cement parks. You've turned in what used to be our beach access, where we used to have parking at the oceanfront on the ocean side. You've turned it into entertainment parks, and our Parks and Rec take care of that. They take care of the quote-unquote park at 31st Street. I think it's a 99-year lease that was transferred after Gold Key sold that, which shouldn't have been transferred. It should have been a new contract. I think there's a 99-year contract for leasing the property at the Dairy Queen, and then we have entertainment there. So Parks and Rec, you know, they need to be taking care of our neighborhood parks, which I've heard y'all talk about. You know, many of them are horrible, like in Red Wing, they're rusty trash cans, and it's just a mess over there. You should care about the kids. I know Mr. Rouse talks about this a lot. Take care of all the kids. It isn't just certain youth. You can't just say it's certain youth that are causing the problem. It's people of all ages that are causing crime, and they need safe, healthy things to do. We need more family, parks where we can decide what we want. It's not your job to entertain us or anyone else, especially not when you have debt. Okay, 8, ordinance to transfer $400,000 capital project 1075 21 Century Enterprise Resource Planning to capital project 1095 Enterprise Scheduling and Timekeeping System, right, implementation of telestaff for the police department and emergency communications and citizen services. Yeah, you keep transferring money. You have budgets. Mr. Moss, you talked about it many times. We need to stick to the budgets. But then you, of all people, $78 million for the arena, and then you allowed it to stay for the sports center. So, everybody grandstands. You say, oh, aren't you wonderful? You're wonderful. Staff is wonderful. You hire the staff. Of course they do what you want them to do. But you don't listen to the citizens. Glad you think that's funny, Mr. Dyer. Okay.
Okay, I'll open planning items, and the only one not pulled is item number 3.
So they're all pulled except for 3?
That is correct.
Okay. Grace Bible Church of Virginia Beach, modification of conditions, Ray religious use, London Bridge Road, Princess Anne. Okay, all these churches are expanding, and everything hasn't even been opened. I just oppose, you have select people that you help, private developers, special banks, certain churches. The list of churches that you work with, Mr. Dyer, is not the entire city. There's a few token ones that aren't, part of the NAACP, CTAC, et cetera. But, when George Mins was here, he cared about all the citizens, and I really miss him because even though he took care of CTAC, he looked out for due process. And I want to make sure, on May 31st, in person, that you honor and remember all of the victim families and our veterans. You act like you care about the veterans. You put everything, all these statues at the oceanfront for tourism, but you don't go in person. You can wear a mask. I don't care if you wear a hazmat suit. You can go in person to pay your respects to the family of Christopher Rapp, Catherine Nixon, Alexander Gusev, Michelle Missy Langer, Mary Louise Gale, Robert Bobby Williams, Tara Welch Gallagher, Richard Nettleton, Joshua Hardy, Lakita Brown, Ryan Keith Cox, and Herbert Burt Snelling. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Vice Mayor, could you do the consent agenda, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move for approval under the consent agenda. Under ordinances and resolutions, item H1, ordinance to amend City Code Section 2-75, Ray non-merit and merit employees. Item 2, ordinances to award a $5,000 community services micro grant to A, Greater Hampton Roads Diaper Bank, Ray assist with cost of purchasing diapers. B, Men of Faith Incorporated, Ray hold a basketball camp at Virginia Beach Sports Center. Item 3, resolution requests the Commonwealth Virginia Public Health Commissioner to designate Virginia Beach as a single public health district and authorize certain actions in furtherance of such designation. Item 4, ordinance to authorize the acquisition of property in fee simple for right-of-way, Ray West Neck Road Phase 4 project, and the acquisition of temporary and permanent easements either by agreement or condemnation. Item 5, ordinance to authorize temporary encroachments onto a portion of city-owned property known as Lake Wesley, located at the rear of 542 Southside Road. Ray maintain an existing bulkhead and construct and maintain proposed piles, boat lift, riprap, ramp, floating dock, and jet ski floats. Item 6, ordinance to appropriate $97,000 to provide an interest-free loan to Plaza Volunteer Rescue Squad, Ray purchase of a new ambulance. Item 7, ordinance to accept and appropriate $10,530 from the Virginia Department of Forestry to the FY 2020-2021 Parks and Recreation operating budget and authorize a local match Ray community tree planting initiatives. Item 8, ordinance to transfer $400,000 from capital project number 100075, 21st Century Enterprise Resource Planning, to capital project number 10095, Enterprise Scheduling and Timekeeping System, Ray implementation of telestaff for the Police Department and Emergency Communications and Citizen Services.
Open a public hearing on planning.
Under planning, item 3, Grace Bible Church of Virginia Beach Incorporated for a modification of conditions, Ray religious use adjacent and south of 2285 London Bridge Road in the Princess Anne District. So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, call the vote, please, on the consent agenda.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berluci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11 to 0, you've approved the consent agenda as read by Vice Mayor Wood.
Okay, we're going to open a public hearing on planning now, and item number 1 is George Randolph Webb Jr. and Lila Graham Webb for a street closure, Ray 25-foot wide by 125 long portion of Holly Road adjacent to 401 49th Street, District 5, Lynn Haven. Do you have any speakers?
Eddie Burdon represents the applicant, and we have 2 opposed.
Hey, Eddie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For the record, my name's Eddie Burdon, and it's my pleasure to come before you this evening representing Mr. and Mrs. Webb, who reside at 401 49th Street. Have resided there for under 3 years. When they bought this property, their good friend Harry Lester suggested to them that since their front steps to the house and driveway, sidewalk, landscaping, et cetera, were located in this paper street, that they should close it and acquire it so that they would be able to actually own where all these improvements that have been on this property for decades existed. And that is the subject of this application, is to close the western one half of an unimproved with public paved right-of-way, paper street, that is designated 3rd Street on the map of the Hollies on the Atlantic Ocean. That's the name of the plat. That was recorded in 1920 in the office, in the record office of the clerk of court of Princess Anne County at that time, now Virginia Beach, in map book 6 at page 107. There was absolutely no reservation of the fee titles to any of the right-of-ways, the streets, on the plat of the map of the Hollies. And there were no express reservations of the fee titles in any of the streets by the developer or any successor contained in any of the deeds from that developer on any of the lots on that plat. In 1916, prior to the recordation of the plat of the Hollies, the plat of Lincoln Park was recorded in map book 5 at page 151, and that plat created Holly Road. Holly Road terminated at the southeast end of Crystal Lake, a block and a half further west from 3rd Street on the plat of the Hollies as created 4 years later. I suspect that because that road wasn't going to go through Crystal Lake, that at some point this 3rd Street on the plat of the Hollies that runs and stops at 49th Street and has been called 3rd Street, Holly, and Holly Avenue and Holly Road at various times, that's where the road went. And then when it got to 49th Street, that's as far as it's ever gone. From 49th Street, the road does not connect to 50th, and in fact, the plat of the Hollies stops at the alley, the unimproved alley that runs east-west behind this portion that we're just talking about. In 1956, on 50th Street, a plat was recorded that created 50th Street called the subdivision of North Hollies, and Lot 13 is up there above the alley, and that property is owned by Rob Dewey and his wife, there is no and has never been a road that went through there. And this has not been improved as a road at any point in time either. At the Planning Commission, Mr. Haye, who has signed up to speak tonight, made a number of assertions, among other things, that he drove his car down what he contends was an improved street where this paper street is located, all the way through to 50th Street and beyond. Now, this paper street has existed for over 100 years and has never been improved. He also asserted that the title certification that I provided to the city per the application and as reviewed by the city attorney was defective, and he apparently believes, I couldn't really tell from his remarks, or contends that Mr. Ed Lindsley or his heirs own this right-of-way. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Haye's assertions, to put it politely, are simply incorrect and totally unfounded in fact. As conditioned by the recommendation of your planning staff and unanimous planning commission, with the various easements that will be retained for underground utilities and for pedestrian access through, there will be no public inconvenience whatsoever resulting from the placing this strip of land that has had the Webbs and their predecessors of title, front steps, porch, sidewalk, landscaping, driveway on it for decades, in fact, for over 50 years. There is a 10-foot access through to 50th Street that is, as you can see up there, located off-center that was on that 1956 plat, excuse me, that it's not improved, but people do come through here, and the Webbs, in the less than 3 years they've been here, they have never stopped anyone from coming through, have no intention. And with this closure, the city will maintain an ingress egress through there for the public. It'll just put the property on the tax rolls, and the city will get some consideration for it, although it does not create any additional buildable area on the Webb's property because of the easements that are reserved in the 5 conditions, all of which are acceptable to my client. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Bernard? Mr. Moss?
I just have one, and it's not prejudicial to my vote on the application. But obviously, when people buy and finance property, title people will look for encroachments and things. So when in this period of time was the last time that title was issued on this property when these encroachments should have been identified but were not? And what caused all of a sudden for them to be identified such that we find ourselves here?
And I can't speak all the way back, but what is typically occurs when there are these encroachments into unimproved public right-of-ways, the title insurance company will take exception to them, and then buyers will determine whether they are going to pursue. If they're going to go ahead and buy the property, they can theoretically walk away if it's a bad situation. But if it's not a difficult circumstance and they believe that the city's not going to improve it, I mean, we've got alleys in Croatan, et cetera, they'll buy it and, take their chances. And as we've seen in many other parts of the city, Croatan, alleys, and others, if they're not going to be improved, it's much better off for everybody that they be put on the tax records because the people that live there are maintaining it. And if you maintain the easements like happened here, everybody
Well,
wins.
no argument on
I know.
that part. Just thank you for the education.
It's been in back title letters. I've seen back title letters going back 30 years on this property. It was the same, exception for that encroachment existed.
But at a later date, but not tonight, Mr. City Manager, I would like to know when these encroachments were permitted, and if they were before the city was formed, great. And I guess if they were, then my question goes on, there's no need to be answered. But I'm always looking by the process by which encroachments happen. But lots of things happened in the 40s and 50s. Thank you very much, Mr. Bordeaux.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Wilson?
Hi, Eddie, how are you? Hope you enjoyed your vacation.
It was very nice. I was able to spend some time with my dad down in the villages and had a very nice time. Thank you.
So the steps and porch and landscaping, it's encroaching illegally into the city's right-of-way, is that correct?
When you say illegally,
Well, I mean, did the city
everybody's,
right, well, do they have permission from the city to be there?
well, implicitly, because it's been there for like
No,
50 years.
Right, but
I mean,
then,
driveways and landscaping, we all maintain driveways, portions of them, and landscaping and sidewalks that are in the city right-of-way. And in this case, but the driveway is all the way up as opposed to, and it's been that way since the
no,
house.
and the North End is a special place, and I get that, and things have been there for many, many years, and I'm also a little bit familiar with some of Ed Lindsley, and
Right.
especially when I was on the school board, he owned the land underneath 15th Street when we got ready to build Cook Elementary.
And portions of the real Holly Road as well,
And, yeah, and
but
we had,
no longer.
we had to pay him quite a bit of money to build that school. So I guess since there's some question about all this, would it have been just easier to ask for the city to allow the encroachment and permit that rather than selling the property?
Well, if there were some potential that there would be a road there, which there is none, then the answer might well be yes. But there is no right-of-way going to 50th Street. So are you going to condemn the Dewey's home on 50th Street to create a road through there?
No, of course not.
Right, so the point
No.
is, there's no interest that the public has in this section that's been there for 100 years and never improved as a street that aren't being kept by the easements being placed on it on the conditions.
But it's not, it's more going to the claim of Mr. Lindsley's and his heirs.
Well, that's what I went over. That is
that.
completely specious. Mr. Lindsley has no interest at all, no one does, other than the city of Virginia Beach, because the fee title in 3rd Street was never reserved by the developer, which means it belongs to the city of Virginia Beach. This is not, it's not the plat of Lincoln Park, it's not Cape Henry Syndicate where there were reservations. And this is not the Holly Road that Mr. Haye apparently believes it is. Okay, that's just a name that's been placed on it. It's on the old plats, it's 3rd Street and Holly Avenue. And there is no interest whatsoever, period, in this property
And-
that Ed Lindsley ever had, or anybody.
And I'm only asking this in behalf of the Webbs. I mean, I want them to be, I don't want to take anything away from them. I mean, obviously, this is part of their property, and it should remain part of, you know, with all the things that they have. So I'm just trying to work my way through this.
Right. But-
Because I definitely want to make sure that they can have that. We're just trying to see if there was a different way to get to where we need to go for them. So I totally
that's-
support them having keeping what they have. I'm just trying to figure out another way to keep
Well,
it.
and that is, again, with the easements that are being maintained by the city per the conditions for the access to get through to 50th Street for pedestrian access, for the utility easement, the drainage easement, for any underground utilities that are there now, or that the city wishes to place there in the future if they ever decide they want to put something in the 15-foot lane behind it, is all maintained with this closure.
So if we grant this tonight and something happens in the future with Mr. Lindsley's heirs, then that's just their problem to deal with.
Well, that's correct, but that will not happen. I know your city attorney's office has reviewed this as well. His contentions are just plain wrong. Not any doubt about it. It's not a close call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner is David Haye.
Okay. You know, since the city of Virginia Beach is really a business, and we have $3 billion and $3 billion debt, I think it's important, you know, instead of Eddie, how was your vacation? Mr. Burdon, he's an attorney. He's with Sykes Burdon, which, you know, is a little bit of a conflict. But, yeah, there's, you know, this thing, 401 49th Street, these paper roads, you know, that could be a pedestrian walkway for the other people that live there. And there's no reason to give it away or to sell it to someone so they can, you know, block that. That could be used for emergency, in case of an emergency. All these closures, alleyway closures, everything at Croatan, Sandbridge, you're making it much, much harder, especially with the taller, wider condos and everything, for the police, fire, and rescue to reach places. I've witnessed many times when they zigzag all around. You had Armada Hoffler's project taking over Atlantic Avenue. When has that ever happened in prior years? In years past, come May, all the roads were clean, and you know, the locals were welcome back. It wasn't, you know. Anyway, I'm opposed to street closures. This is 25 feet by 125 feet long portion. 401 49th Street, Lynn Haven District, which is Mr. Woods. And, you know, I can save some of this for the other thing, but there's a lot of conflicts with Town Bank and with many of you who have loans with Town Bank, who own resort property, you have a conflict. And speaking of paper roads, the road behind the Chick-fil-A where there was a major accident with a city vehicle a couple months back, and I've talked to Ms. Hindley, Mr. Dyer, Mr. Moss, for decades, since 2014, about the problems on General Booth. And Dam Neck, Dam Neck General Booth was one of the worst intersections in the entire city many years ago. And there's a paper road, I assume belonging to McCleskey, because he owns most of that property on both sides of Dam Neck, where people cut through the back to go to Chick-fil-A, and there's no light there. So I think the city needs to be aware of all
Thank you very
this.
much, Ms. Messner.
Oh, thank you.
The next speaker is David Haye.
Welcome.
Thank y'all. It's good to see y'all. My name's David Haye. I have a wife, Sue, and she and I oppose this. We've lived at 8306 Atlantic Avenue since 1977. My wife and I got married in 76. I lived in 1974 on 88th Street and used to ride my bike all around the beach and took the back roads to go south because Atlantic Avenue was very dangerous. They weren't bike lanes back in those days. In 1969, I worked for Gene Dixon in the Cavalier Hotel as a beach and cabana boy. And that brought me down here after law school because I made a lot of friends in Virginia Beach. I loved it. And when I was 4 or 5 years old, we used to rent a place on 84th Street. My family would stay there, and I rode my bike. I enjoyed the beach. I enjoyed the roads and everything in Virginia Beach. I rely on my comments I made to the Planning Commission. I also rely on the email I sent to the city attorney that he never responded to, but he got a deputy city attorney to finally respond to it. I told y'all that I would introduce some maps where Ed, I only have the sole map left. I also have Ed Lindsley's title notes. And I got these because some of the attorneys that used to represent Ed gave these things to me when they retired because they knew I'd keep it in a safe place. The map I've got runs from 89th Street all the way down through Dam Neck, through Croatan, the whole area. Bay Colony, Great Neck Point, Great Neck, all of that area right there. These maps were used for him to claim underlying fee to streets. And as Grover Wright used to say, the Gaza strips on maps. They're reserve strips. And Lake Wesley was owned by the city of Virginia Beach. Lindsley claimed ownership to that. We beat him. I never lost a case against Ed Lindsley. That's why I was hired, because I worked in 74 to 76. I beat him on cases.
Thank you very much, sir.
Let me introduce these in evidence. All right, these are maps. They're two separate maps.
You want me to pass them out up there?
Yeah, and these are an editorial from the Virginia Pilot.
Okay, I'll be happy. How many copies do you have here? More than 11?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll answer any questions y'all have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay, at this point, do we have a motion? Oh, Mr. Burdon, you have a rebuttal?
ever so brief. I'm glad that Mr. Haye apparently has abandoned his driving through there thing now. I guess he intends he rode a bike through. I've represented Mr. Lindsley, knew Mr. Lindsley very well. He did some good things for the city and some not so good things for the city. But he never had, and there's no record of him ever having claimed any interest in any of the streets in the Plat of the Hollies, and that's because there's zero basis for him having to do so. And that's the bottom line. And I'm sorry that Mr. Haye was mistaken in his belief, but this is a case that not only would he beat Mr. Lindsley, I could beat Mr. Lindsley's heirs if they tried to claim an interest in any of the fees on this Plat of the Hollies, because he doesn't have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wood?
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Move approval.
Move for approval. Do we have a second? Okay, any discussion on this? Okay, yes.
I did have a long conversation with Mr. Haye, just so I wanted to put that for the record, and I followed up with a very good conversation with the city attorney. And there isn't any city equities that are being lost, and we're not being exposed to any liabilities by this vote. But I just did want to clarify that Mr. Haye let him know that I did follow up with the city attorney and confirmed our situation.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Okay, Mr. Tower.
Since I'm the only lawyer on council, I would follow up and say I had the same experience. I discussed this with Mr. Haye and with Mr. Stiles, and I intend to vote for the matter.
Okay.
And I, too, had a conversation with Mr. Haye and Mr. Stiles.
Okay, Ms. Wilson?
I just also wanted to say I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Haye and the time that he's taken with this and the research that he's put into it, and also for being such a longtime citizen of our great city. It really, my question to Mr. Verdon, that the Webb family, they're the ones that are taking the risk, and if they're willing to do that, then I think that's up to them. And there's really no liability on the city. So they know what that is. But I do appreciate Mr. Haye bringing this bit of history to us today.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, at this point, the vote is open. The motion is to approve.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berluci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley? Councilmember Jones? Was that aye? Thank you. Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 11-0, you've approved the application of George Randolph Webb Jr. and Leila Graham Webb.
Okay, our next planning item 2 is Oceanfront Investments LLC for a street closure, a 420 square foot portion of Atlantic Avenue adjacent to 4201 Atlantic Avenue, District 6 Beach.
R.J. Nutter representing the applicant.
Good evening.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Barrett, forgive me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, members of council. For the record, my name is R.J. Nutter. I'm an attorney representing the applicant. This is a street closure. Fortunately, Ed Lindsley is nowhere near this application. The property that we're trying to close is a small strip of land that was given to the city by the Virginia Department of Transportation. So he's completely out of this chain of title, I'm happy to say, given the last application. Our sole reason for this request today is because we wish to place a sign to advertise the new Oceanfront Hotel at Marriott. And we originally began this as an encroachment with the city attorney's office, and then we determined that you can't use an encroachment to place a sign on property because of your billboard ordinance, that any off-site advertising would in fact be a billboard. And since the property, albeit small, was owned by the city, that would result in a billboard. So with that, we said, why don't we just buy it? We'll use one of the city's appraisers, approved appraisers for the appraisal. So we obtained that appraisal several months ago. I thought we were going to council, and then Alex Stiles, my good friend, called me and said, well, you need to file a street closure application too. So we filed a street closure application that brought us here tonight, and I'm happy to say that your staff is recommending approval, that the Planning Commission recommended approval, that the viewers appointed by council also looked at this and said there would be no negative impact by this application. I would also share with you that the city is reserving a large number of easements over this property for a water main, and that if anything happens to our sign As a result of the water main, we have to repair our own sign. All of those conditions are acceptable. We will purchase the property for the appraised value, and we're here solely to make sure that we don't create a billboard inadvertently by this process. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Nutter? Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
The next speaker is Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner is Jafari Jones.
Okay, I think it's really important to note that, you know, the city attorneys, unlike the city clerk, whose duties are to help the citizens equally with the council, the city attorneys are hired and paid to work for the city, and the city appoints planning, and planning's job is to help people. Alex Stiles is one of the city attorneys. I forget which firm he was from. I know which firm Mr. Stiles is from, and Mr. Kaufman and Knowles, Mr. Tower. But they give opinions. The city attorneys give you opinions, and that's what you base your conflicts on. And Mr. Stolley, who's admitted his conflicts, he and Mark Herring are the only ones that can give state rulings, and they both have conflicts. So it's up to y'all. You can do what you want, supposedly legally, but morally, you're failing to take care of the citizens, and you're taking care of select developers and their attorneys. Yeah, and it's never ending with all the money we've paid to Gold Key. And Ms. Henley, you agreed to an additional, I think, $5.6 million for jobs. Those aren't real jobs. Economic development and city money should not be paying for jobs for any private developer. That's not your job. Your job is to take care of public safety and to take care of our neighborhoods. I mean, look at this. I have pictures of when it first started over there, when you tore down the other Cavalier Hotel, and I appreciate the comments about the Dixon family. The Cavalier Hotel was a beautiful place. It's been destroyed. It's been desecrated by greed. Yeah, I'm disgusted, and you talk about preservation, historic preservation. That's just tax breaks for certain groups. Yeah, like I said, I have pictures I've taken of, you know, when they hook up to build the parking garage for the 31st Street Hotel, which he's now sold to someone else. They also hooked up to air water supply. How much did they pay to use their water while they're building? Yeah, everything is geared towards, you know, the hotels. Okay.
Thank you very
I'm in
much.
opposition. Thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Jafari Jones.
Good evening.
Good
Can you hear
evening.
me? Okay. We are requesting a street closure for DeShayla Harris, Donovan Lynch, India Kager, Demario Joyner, Matthew Russian, Coleman Sample, along with the BLM Plaza, as seen in solidarity around the nation, as well as a tribute to the victims of the Virginia Beach Strong tragedy. We are here to find healing for our city. Please consider all street closures unbiased. Therefore, I approve the street closure for the 420 square foot portion of Atlantic Avenue adjacent to 4201 Atlantic Avenue at the Oceanfront Investments LLC, unless the community in which inhabit is opposed to it. And we just wanted to make sure that we got that on public record today because it is so difficult to get things on public record. So this is our agreeing with this street closure and asking that there is a non-biased consideration of all future street closures to be considered in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nutter? You'll waive? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, that would be Mr. Tower.
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Mr. Moss?
I have a question for the city attorney. Without getting into details, but in light of where we are in litigation with regards to billboards, it seems to me that encroachment would have been an appropriate course of action versus sale. So why are we doing sale when where we're going, encroachment would allow us to get to the same end?
Right now, the law does not permit it to be an encroachment. Right now, your billboard ordinance would still prohibit it.
Understand, but is there a crisis of timing that demands this action be taken at this point in time?
Well, we can't presume what council is going to do with the future, with the ordinance moving forward. I think I know what you're going to do, but I can't.
You are correct.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, the vote is open.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berluci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Nay.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood? Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 10-1, you have approved the application of Oceanfront Investments LLC.
Okay, item number 4 under planning, JESJB LLC for conditional use permit, raise short-term rental at 409 24th and a half Street, District 6 Beach.
Mr. Burdon is the attorney for the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mayor Dyer, members of the council, for the record, Eddie Burdon, Virginia Beach attorney representing CESJB LLC on this application for short-term rental. First of all, I want to thank the council for deferring this matter a month ago because the sign on the property had been blown down and my clients hadn't taken good care to get it back up timely. They have gone by every day in the last 4 weeks to make sure that the sign was properly posted. Now, this property, the request of this property, it's 1 block west of Arctic Avenue. It's not a new use for this little beach cottage that was built in 1939. The prior owners for 30-plus years, who are residents of the Richmond area, use this as a weekly rental, not advertised and not managed by a local company. They rented it weekly to their friends, relatives, members of their church, acquaintances. The same people would rent it for a week during the warm weather months, the same week every year. So it was not registered as a short-term rental when that became what was required. None of the people, there was nobody local, they didn't realize that. When my clients who were redeveloping other very small dilapidated properties in this same area approached them, and they said they told them what the story was, and my clients have purchased it. Eventually they will be redeveloping it, which they've done I think a magnificent job of redeveloping property in this area, the area that's around Arctic Avenue, and in all of the property here is zoned A12 multifamily. To the east across the alley is a old non-conforming use with multiple little bungalows and apartments on it. Across Arctic Avenue, the Breedens developed a beautiful multi-story apartment complex and the iFly. The application, again, if you look at the map that's in the staff report, there are short-term rentals in this area, quite a number of them. And as I've said previously, the short-term rentals in this area are totally appropriate and have actually sped up the redevelopment that was much needed for decades in this area. This is not the single-family portion of Old Beach back west of Baltic Avenue. This area is quite different, and it's zoned quite differently. There are 19 conditions attached to this street closure that are all recommended for approval, all agreed to by my clients and recommended approval by unanimous planning commission and your staff. And they include making improvements to the alley, the 10-foot alley that runs north-south, and planting a hedgerow to segregate the 2 parking spaces. This is just a 2-bedroom, small cottage, and the use, like I said, it's been in place for over 30 years as a short-term rental. But eventually, it will be redeveloped. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at this point? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Burdon, Ms. Wilson has a question.
So if it's redeveloped, will the short-term rental run with the land?
I'm honestly don't know the answer to that, but I mean they're going to
Maybe Mark.
redevelop in a couple of years.
I know the answer to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Conditional use permits run with the land, but your conditional use permits for short-term rentals have a 5-year period and have to be renewed or they expire. So that would cover the issue.
All right, thank you.
And if I could add also, when they redevelop it, I'm quite certain that there'll be more than 2 bedrooms. So I don't, even though it runs for 5 years, I'm not really sure that there's any way that it can be used.
okay, anyone else?
The next speaker is Barbara Messner, and after Ms. Messner will be Nancy Parker.
I think it's interesting that Mr. Tower says he's the only attorney. We pay attorneys. You know, it's not your job to be an attorney. We had enough problems when Billy Harrison was on council with his conflicts. Okay, this is near Virginia Beach Middle School. I remember at one time, Mr. Bellucci's not here, and who else? I remember at one time when you said we needed to limit the number, and you know how important. Ms. Wilson, you talked about how wonderful the North End is, and you talked about how special the middle of the beach is. You call it Resort Beach. All neighborhoods are important, and there are too many short-term rentals. We have hotels. The hotels are responsible for public safety. Our police cannot be everywhere all the time. They're stretched. The reason you have problems retaining them is because they end up, you know, babysitting SWAT officers in here for a city council meeting. And you were talking about having a council meeting, you know, moving back to city council. I sent you an email. It's ridiculous. We have limited space here. It's ridiculous. The reason you built another building is because you said that one was unsafe. So this is near Virginia Beach Middle School. There's flooding there. And parking disappears with every, with everything that you approve, you allow people to pave their front yards, which restricts parking. It's only for them. So we have less and less parking for the public. There's 450,000 people in the city, and I think it's 1.8 million regionally, and they come to Virginia Beach. There aren't that many other beaches, but there isn't parking and there isn't access. So we shouldn't be having any more. I mean, this is, you know, a block away from Virginia Beach Middle School, and 24th Street is a major corridor. It's a major road. So, you know, I oppose, and I remember when Ms. Henley, I guess she's taking her break too, it's like everybody takes a break. said she wasn't going to approve anymore, and Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much.
I can hear it if you just.
The next speaker is Nancy Parker. And after Ms. Parker, we do have a WebEx speaker.
Welcome.
Honorable Mayor Dyer, honorable members of council, my name is Nancy Parker, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. If I might just take a moment, excuse me. Are you familiar with the Dutch story about the little boy and the dam, and how he came along and saw that the dam was leaking, and he stuck his finger in the dam, waiting for people to come along to help because he was trying to preserve the dam, and he knew if he didn't, that the dam could break and it would swamp the town? Well, those of us who come here and talk to you about the short-term rentals are basically like that little Dutch boy. It's not because I don't have anything else better to do today, but it's because I do care about my neighborhood. And it's important that we preserve what these neighborhoods mean. If you look on your map on page 191, yes, there are some short-term rentals there. A lot of those were done, have been there, but really, there was really little usage of them. And if you look, you'll see there's 3 more waiting in the wings after this one. So we are going to increase it by 4 more. Now, I appreciate what he's trying to do on that corner, but if you go by and look at that site, it's no bigger than a postage stamp. And when he said there could be up to 3 bedrooms there, I gasped in the back. And I thought, oh my gosh. Because they already have 3 short-term rentals right next to it that they got and asked for from council or from the process. What I'd like to do, though, is to make sure that it would appear that this is just another short-term rental request, and the Planning Commission treated it as such with a unanimous vote. But I cannot stress this point enough. The residential identity of the beach community, in fact, all resort neighborhoods, has value to those like me that have invested and chosen to live here long before short-term rentals became the latest investment tool. They are an intrusive game changer benefiting a handful of investors, comparatively speaking. Compare the requirements for a home occupation conditional use permit and those of a short-term rental. They are vastly different. The impacts on the residentials next to them are vastly different. Each of these requests is a very big deal, and cumulative, we are experiencing a profound impact on the cohesiveness and quality that creates a residential community. No amount of good management changes this fact. You control the quality of our lives, our daily lives, and our neighborhood stability on your votes. You create holes in our communities when you put an overwhelming abundance of short-term rentals there. When is enough enough? And when is the totality of the neighborhood going to be the driving factor for these intrusive business entities?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. In just 1 second, I certainly enjoyed sitting there in the back because I was hearing old names come up, Ed Lansley, Stephen Mansfield, and I hope that you guys 20 years from now can come back and kind of have that same feeling of, oh my God.
Nancy Parker, yeah.
They're still around.
Mr. Moss.
I know I always do this, but I think just common courtesy, she's owed it. I'd like to recognize Nancy Parker for having served 16 years on this body and served the citizens of Virginia Beach, and I thank you very much for your service.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's enjoyable, and I don't envy you all in the position you're in on this particular situation because this has been an ongoing. I know you're all exhausted, and those of us in the community who have followed this, we're exhausted also. So the sooner we get this resolved, you can move on to some other things also. So good luck.
We have 1 speaker via WebEx, Frank Raymarkers. If you would pause 2 to 3 seconds before beginning your comments, you may begin now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sir, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, hello, I'm Frank Raymakers III. I reside in the Old Beach neighborhood at a home constructed in 1939, which is a short-term rental during the summertime. Our home is registered by the Historical Society of Virginia Beach, along with a historical duplex located at 318 27th Street, which is also a historical home also registered with the Virginia Beach Historical Society. Both of these homes have been maintained and remodeled to original condition, thanks to the funds generated by the short-term rentals which of them both are. The STRs are a necessity in the resort city, which is Virginia Beach. Numerous people, families especially, prefer to stay in homes and not hotels, especially due to the COVID pandemic at the present time. Excuse me. They have been, due to online reservation channels such as VRBO, Expedia, Airbnb, vacation rentals or short-term rentals have become much more prevalent in the Old Beach area, the resort area, also known as. Proper hosting services and continuous communication with the guests that stay in short-term rentals are absolutely necessary. Having the guests be aware of the rules and regulations of the city are mandatory with our guests. We strongly support all STRs in the Virginia Beach area, especially in the resort area, which is Old Beach. Millions of dollars are generated by taxes that STR owners pay that improve our city by improving our city, we also improve the quality of life here in Virginia Beach. STRs are part of the tourism industry and have been for 40 years here in Virginia Beach plus. And we must find a way to synergize the neighbors along with the short-term rental industry. Thank you so much for serving our city. And also, I thank you for your time and allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Mayor, that's all the speakers. Mr. Bourdon, would you like to come up for rebuttal?
Just a couple remarks. Compared to the rest of us, Ms. Parker is certainly a lot better preserved than the rest of us that have been doing this for a long time and do what y'all are doing for a long time. And I do appreciate some of what Nancy, Ms. Parker had to say, because it's a tough position that this short-term rental situation has put people in. I understand that. And that's why I referenced the location of this property. And I would also, state that the people who live in this area, right at Arctic, in this particular area, if some of you are familiar with what this property looks like and what all the other properties that my clients have redeveloped in this immediate area now look like, and it's amazing. I mean, it's an envy because no public monies are involved, and frankly, this area needed badly to be redeveloped. I'm not talking about the entirety of Old Beach. I'm talking about just this little area, and this is not a new use. This particular cottage has been used in the manner that we're proposing for over 30 years. It's going to be extremely well managed. There won't be problems with it. It is true it's a small cottage on a small piece of property. It doesn't have any parking now, and it will have 2 parking spaces. It hasn't had any for all these number of years. So I understand the concerns in, where you have single-family homes that are, older and well-preserved, but these short-term rentals are actually a benefit to some places. There may be a detriment to others, but this, I think, is a classic example of where it fits, and it will probably, in all likelihood, be just temporary anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bourdon. Okay, Mr. Tower.
Thank you, Mayor. As I have said before, I have tried very hard to balance the matters that we've heard tonight that I don't need to repeat. They were pretty well done by Ms. Parker, talking about the preservation of the neighborhood, and our other speakers talking about the redevelopment and the demand for these properties and the benefits to the city that come from them. I have co-sponsored an ordinance that would eliminate future development of STRs in the Old Beach District. Having said that, I've also pledged that I will try to view these under the current law and not some law that has not been enacted yet. And this is one that I think, given the development immediately next to it and this particular property, if it is redeveloped as I said, I think the economics that Mr. Bourdon speaks to are pretty clear also. I don't think you're going to be able to redevelop it as a two-bedroom and economically. But I'm going to vote in favor of it. I think the owners that have built these other STRs that are in a row with these have done a good job and attempted very hard not only to build a good product, but to have them well managed. I do think management is a key. I do know the management company that these owners use, and I've had enough investigation of them to believe that they would do an excellent job in protecting the neighbors and everyone else from the kinds of disruptions that we occasionally hear about in short-term rentals. So I'm going to move to approve it.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Wood.
Thank you.
All right, and we're ready to call the roll here.
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berlucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley left the meeting early. Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Nay.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
No.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 8 to 2, this application has been approved.
Okay, we're now ready to move on, Mr. Wood, to appointments. Oh, wait a minute, hang on a second. Oh, no, that's after appointments.
Mr. Mayor,
Mike on. Gotcha.
sorry, Mr. Mayor, nominate the following individuals to boards and commissions: to the Audit Committee, Emilson Espirito; to the Community Policy and Management Team, Ginger Ploger; to the In-House Pharmacy Exploratory Committee, School Board Member Kimberly Melnick; to Minority Business Council, Ed Hopper and Olga Torres; to the Parks and Recreation Commission student, Ms. Mika Twyman; and to the Towing Advisory Board, Bradley Volner.
Okay. We have a second. Okay, we'll open on the vote on this?
Councilmember Abbott?
Aye.
Councilmember Berlucci?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Councilmember Rouse? Councilmember Tower?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Wooten?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood? Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
By a vote of 10 to 0, you have appointed those as nominated by Vice Mayor Wood.
Okay, I think we have some unfinished business. Who would like to start it off?
Yes, I'll start off.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier, during closed session, I would say we were discussing the expansion of the Citizens Review Panel. And one of this came up, Mr. City Attorney looked at me, I can discuss what we discussed correctly.
You discussed appointments in closed session per the read-in, and this flowed out of that discussion, and it needed to be an open session. So yes, sir, you can.
Okay, great, thank you. So one of the things we discussed was expanding the members on the Citizens Review Panel because the current recommended people who were recommended for this panel was not all encompassing of or reflective of the community as a whole. And I made the following comments. I think we must be intentional on appointing who we're appointing to serve on this board if we are to build the trust within the community that we are seeking. And I wonder what the current makeup or recommended members of this committee, makeup of this committee, will it be achieving the goal that the community advocated for? And that was trust, transparency, and building accountability. Now, the recommended Citizen Review Panel is made up of a majority of people who have legal and law enforcement backgrounds. It's not a bad thing. It's good to have legal representation on this committee, but to have the majority of the people make up this committee is not reflective of the community that advocated for the CRP. So I want to be perfectly clear for the record. I think having police representation is good. I think having legal representation is good. But I believe that a citizen review panel that was requested by a community in Virginia Beach with the goal of building trust and transparency between the police and between the community, should have more community voices than what is currently being proposed. So with that, I want to ask Councilmember Wooten what she'd be open to, since she was the sponsor of the resolution, to expanding the citizen review panel by 4 to make sure we are being more reflective of the community in which we are trying to serve. Thank you.
And I wanted to follow up on that conversation we had, and I'm entertaining, I guess that motion, or I guess it wouldn't be considered a motion, but a request to expand the task force for the Citizens Review Panel, because the makeup that we have currently suggested, as was mentioned, is not reflective of, in terms of, the background. We have, people who are experienced with law enforcement, retired police officers, those who may have served in the legal background or are attorneys. We have suggested also a couple of faith-based leaders, but we don't have youth in that group. We don't have the regular everyday citizen. And for that reason, I certainly would entertain that request to expand it to 4 more people. Otherwise, we have a group that's not reflective and that's not diverse, and we do want to keep this process for the task force as transparent and be as, as in our process to be as fair as we can. Those who have sent in applications wanted to make sure that we reviewed your application, wanted to make sure that we made suggestions and appointments from those applications. So either I'm going to extend the task force to 4, or if we keep what we have, I would have to vote no against some of those appointments, because, as I've mentioned, it's not reflective of the community as a whole.
Okay, Mr. Moss and Mr. Bellucci.
Oh, I would certainly yield to Michael if he wants
Okay,
to
Mike.
speak.
Okay, Michael.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moss. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts and reflections, since we've had a little bit of time since the closed session, that I could reflect on the conversation we had. I think it was a spirited conversation, and I think it was a productive one. But I also feel an obligation to just share some of my reservations and concerns about changing the composition from the ordinance that we adopted 2 weeks ago. And that's really procedure-based. I think that the intent of changing the original proposal from 7 members to 11 was to allow each member of council to recommend an individual to the committee from really a carefully curated talent bank. And so, we did do that. And I have no disagreements with Mr. Rouse's observations about the composition as proposed. And I think that he raised a really valid point and concern. I would just ask some rhetorical questions, though, about some of those concerns that were raised. One is, what does reflective of the community mean? I mean, that's a definition that is one that varies, I guess. It's a subjective definition for sure. And also, I think that one of the reasons we're in this position here today is because we didn't do a good enough job at the last meeting of defining the process by which these appointments would occur. And I think that led us in part to this point today. And so I would just, and that's really all of our responsibility. I'm not in any way casting any criticism at any one member or group of members of this body. I just think it's really important that we consider what that process looks like, and we frankly haven't. So I would just pose that question to the body. If we did expand it to 4, what would the process of appointment actually look like? And I think that we should just keep in mind that the suggestion about reflecting the community is extraordinarily subjective. But nevertheless, the observation is well made and well pointed out by Mr. Rouse and others that I can't disagree with the conclusion that the current proposed slate is definitely not reflective of our community. So, but that's a subjective analysis. But anyway, to get to the point, I think we need to focus a little bit more on process today.
Okay, Mr. Moss and then Ms. Wooten.
I concur with Mr. Belushi's assessment, but also with Aaron's point. I think that all of us want whatever the outcome and recommendations of the task force are, and we're not trying to influence what they are, but when they are delivered, that the larger community will see those as, whether we adopt them in whole or in part, as seeing an objective, critical output, or otherwise, we had a process that we went through and we got an answer that the community won't buy into. I think you are correct. We didn't start off and think about, oh, the state law says when we have a civilian review board, its composition is supposed to reflect the demographics of the community. That's a little bit more specific, but it gives you some indication. We didn't have a precept as we looked to say, what we were looking for. I think we all focused on what people with expertise. And I think that was the comment that came out, expertise. And all these people have expertise, but the expertise is of a technical, I'll call it professional dimension, rather than expertise in the experiences that they have with the police department. And so that's a different type of expertise, but I think you're correct. That's an expertise that is underrepresented on this group and really needs to be heard. And I think that's what I heard Ms. Councilwoman Wooten kind of alluding to. I'm trying to not put words in her mouth, but that's what I took away, which is why I supported expanding it. Now, procedurally, how to do that is important. And I'm not suggesting we do it tonight, and I don't think that's what Mr. Rouse or Mr. Wooten is suggesting either, but I do think we should have the ordinance modified to reflect a bigger composition, a later report date than June 1st. And I think what we really is we're looking for a diversity to include younger people and also the people who came out and spoke from that larger spectrum of folks about why they think there's a need for the very powers that I thought your argument the other night, even though you said I might have convinced you, you almost convinced me after the fact, but I don't believe the evidence is going to show that communities that have all that have better trust than communities who don't. But nonetheless, I think we should be open to hearing those voices, or otherwise, when the findings come out, people are not going to accept them no matter how valid they may be empirically. They aren't going to emotionally be bought into, and we wouldn't have spent our time constructively. So I do think we need a discussion, and I would turn to both Ms. Wooten and Mr. Rouse as to how they think we should proceed in the filters, so to speak, to expand the membership, because I don't want to revisit the approach that we had and the people that we did appoint, because that's the process we adopted. But what's the process going to be that allows us to get the diversity that we believe is going to get us, when the product comes out, the very trust in the outcome that I think all of us share? So I would turn to Ms. Wooten and Mr. Rouse and certainly willing to help as well, over the next week to be able to put in our packet and Friday or soon, so we could have that vote on the 18th of May, hopefully, and we could move on. But that's just my observations. I think the conversation was very robust and very candid. And I think that's the healthiest thing you can have, is robust, candid conversation. And I respected all the views. But that was my takeaway, Mr. Mayor, my colleagues. I think that expanding the membership is essential, and I think we really have to make that expansion be in terms of diversity of the experiences and demographics to get the results accepted when they are delivered. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson.
I haven't had a chance to speak yet.
Oh,
He
okay,
mentioned
my
that I would be
apologies.
next. He hadn't seen your hand.
Okay.
But if you like to.
Okay, no, go right
please,
ahead.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
No, I'll defer to her.
Okay.
So she will, fine.
we did have a good conversation, and I think we all thought we had a process in place, and till we looked at everything, and we heard the voices here on the council. I think what we should do, and I would like to just recommend, one, like John suggested, extend the date of the committee, since we're getting a little bit to a late start for the task force. And then we have quite a few talent bank forms to look at, but then I think each of us should think about, and we've heard tonight about more diversity, more young people, and think about these things and reach out and encourage some other people to apply and get those out to everyone. And when will we be looking at appointments again? Be on the 8th? Will we look at these again on the 18th? Is that when we'll be looking at them again?
Well, I really want to hear from Ms. Wooten and Mr. Rouse as to
Well,
how.
but I'd like to hear when would we be looking at these again?
The 18th.
The 18th? Anyway, that's my take on what we might want to do.
Okay, my apology. Ms. Wooten?
So I just wanted to follow up on how we got here, how we got to this process. So after the passage of the resolution, I sent out communication to my colleagues, and I offered a solution. I said, listen, we need to gather the talent bank information, put this information out to the public, allow them to send in their applications, and then we could go through a process. And that process would be looking at those who have or qualify with, background, maybe legal, law enforcement, maybe some regular citizens, and so on. But I laid out that option. I laid out a process that would kind of give us a list of people who, would come to that priority list that we could pull from. However, there was some, other suggestions stating, let's just do it the way we've done it before with boards and commissions historically and so on and so forth. And there were some people who said, well, let us decide who each council member wants to suggest. And so, that's fine. And I think what happened was that's what we still really got. You got what certain council members suggested, who they wanted to do that. And, that was their, decision to do so. And I think that's why we're here now, because we have, the concern is we have more people who have that, who are either former police officers or law enforcement or work for law enforcement, and it becomes inequitable. You have more people with that legal law enforcement, and there becomes an imbalance there. And so what we're trying to do is balance the scale. And that means, a person maybe with a different background, a regular citizen, young adults, so on and so forth. The way we move forward is, again, either we can scrap the process that we did today and go back out to the community, ask for additional applications, talent bank applications, come up with that criteria that we're looking for a task force, and then based on that criteria, select those who meet the criteria, and then you vote on it. That's a pathway forward. If you want to have a process that's not influenced, biased, that's how you move forward with a process. And that's what I was suggesting in my email to my colleagues. So the point is, in this process, I wanted to make sure it was transparent and inclusive, and that we made sure that we're not imbalanced, that we do have a task force that's reflective of the community, whether background, whether age, whatever. We need different perspectives at the table. And this is important because the way we start this task force off is potentially the way that we start off a citizens review panel. So we have to be careful how we start this off. We have to be transparent in this process so that later on we can be transparent in the subsequent process going forward with a citizens review panel. So those are my suggestions in moving forward, and that is a process.
Okay, Ms. Abbott. And then we'll go to Mr. Dehaney.
Thank you. Well, I'd first like to start off and say that I think that everything that's been said so far is very important, and that the process in which we appoint this task force is really significant and monumentous. I counted about 20 applications, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that fielded a lot of phone calls about this task force. So I was actually surprised how light the application pool was, to be completely honest. I took a lot of time reviewing what we got, and in addition to talking to a lot of people who had a lot of interest. So I don't want to discount anybody who applied, because there's a lot of great knowledge in the people that wanted to participate in this process. But I do think, as Councilman Rouse said, that increasing the size of the board would be of great benefit to the task force and making sure that everyone is represented. I think oftentimes the people that are most eager usually have more time and are typically retired, but there are a lot of young people that this issue is very, very important to. And so I might even add that perhaps we want to go to the high schools and add student membership as well, since they're directly impacted by this at some point in their adulthood too. But not to complicate things more, because I do think the suggestion to add 4 more people is a good idea. And I also think we need to extend the timeline in which the task force reviews this, since we are getting kind of a late start. I think somebody else has already said that. And I think Councilwoman Wooten had a suggestion. But I do agree that reviewing all of these applications is really imperative. I know that one of the people that I thought would serve nicely on this task force, there were other applicants that had submitted that I thought were really impressive too, and I'm happy to hear that there seems to be maybe consensus to add additional membership, because I wouldn't want to limit anybody's influence on this, and making sure it's a well-rounded board is of my top concerns. So I hope we can maybe figure out a way to collect all these applications all at once and set a deadline for when the last day we'll accept them. And then I think it would be of benefit for us to review them as a group. I assume that would be in closed session, but I do really think that it's important that we have people from law enforcement, we have people of the legal background, we have people who have had interactions with the police. I think it's important that it's diverse racially, it's diverse geographically, it's diverse by age. I know that those are sometimes hard to find, particularly if you try to get young people. But I think it's possible, and if that means that the outcome of what the task force recommends has to be delayed a little bit, I think it's more important that we get this task force right, so that the outcome, as Councilwoman Wooten and Councilman Rouse and Councilman Moss all said, and others, that the outcome that they produce is trusted by the community.
Okay, at this point, if it's okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Dehaney, then if it's okay, I'm going to make a recommendation. Okay, Mr. Dehaney?
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Rouse wanted to speak, and the question I'm going to ask may take away from what the train of thought that council's on right now. So I could have Mr. Rouse speak, and then I'll go after that, sir.
Okay.
I yield to the floor to the city manager.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and just not meaning to insert myself into the deliberations, but just hearing the scope of this task force led me to ask, either as part of this review or addition to the ordinance that Councilman Moss mentioned for May 18th, or in discussion here today, if we can get a sense of what the expectation will be of staff. Because in thinking about this scope of work, it's pretty solid. It's a pretty expansive and heavy scope. So I'm thinking there's probably going to need to be staff as it relates for research, outreach, and public engagement, as Ms. Abbott talked about a couple of weeks ago as well, note-taking and other things. So either as part of this ordinance that we're reviewing or revising the add it to move it to 15 rather than 11. Either that we should probably add a sense of what the expectation of staff support and other resources, or if we can have, if council could give a discussion now on what the expectation there will be from staff to help this task force with their coming together with their recommendation and the research and the tools they may need for public outreach, as what has been desired by council from this conversation so far.
Okay. Okay, if I can make a suggestion, I think we have a handle on what we want, because once again, let me just say, we do have some precedent with changing and adding numbers. If I recall, a number of years ago on the Minority Business Council, we added people to the Human Rights Commission. We actually added people to be reflective, as the mosaic of the city grew, that we were able to do that. And, we have increased the numbers in boards and commissions, but once again, it is a process problem, a situation. So once again, I would ask Ms. Wooten to get together, and I concur with the city manager to just revise things to add the 4, but then also work with the city manager to talk about some of the logistics that are going to be necessitated to do in that. And concurrently, the members of council reach out to their friends. I think after this robust discussion, or people that they know and acquaintances, that they're aware of the criteria of what we're looking for in terms of youth and diversity and things of that nature, and to encourage them to get their talent and applications in on an expedited basis. And then if we can have that resolution ready for discussion and a vote on the 18th, but also let's expand it to, what about even July 15th? Would that be a better time frame?
So there's a couple of things I'm hearing is adjusting the resolution and then voting on it again in May 18th. So could you help me, I guess, city attorney, since it's already passed, the additions that are being requested, we have to go back through the whole process and pass it and have it reviewed and passed again?
If it is the desire of the council to change things that are specified in the ordinance or the resolution that was passed, then because the body passed it by a resolution by a public vote, amendments to that would have to also have the same dignity. So yes, you would need to come back and change, for example, the 11 to a 15. If you wanted to change that date, you should also do that in an amended resolution. Yes, ma'am.
My only concern with that is it pushes the time frame back. And that was not the intent of this resolution. So I'm gonna have to think about that. I have to think about that. I do want to expand the number, but to go back another, that's 2 weeks, going back another 2 weeks to vote on this measure. Now, then you're moving forward. Then we have to look at the applications again, and then we have to get the list together and make the appointments. And then would it be another week after we make those appointments in a closed session? That's another week, correct, before the appointments actually are voted on in the next council meeting. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, would that be the understanding?
So, because you're looking at, that's 18th, that's another week. Now you're going into June. I really, that's not the intent of the resolution, and it's really prolonging the process. So I am concerned about that. And I'm sorry, your other request was, the second request you were saying was?
Expand the time.
The time frame. right, it appears that we're going to have to expand the timeframe anyway. Yeah, that's just going to put us back into June with this whole process. And if that's what the body wants to do, we can certainly do that. But then we're looking at fastly approaching to July. And we want to do the process right, and I do want to do the process right, but I just don't want to prolong the process inevitably.
Okay. Mr. Moss.
One additional thing that the city manager would like us in the process of doing that to also, and I'd be happy to work with Ms. Wooten in that regard, to size out what we thought the resource requirement is, and the more compressed, you can compress time with money to some extent, and at some point, no matter how much money you have, time can't be compressed. And the other thing is, once we appoint the group, what is the group able to execute in terms of their ability to commit the time? That's going to be a factor we have to deal with. I would make the suggestion, so we don't end up coming back, that the wording of the amended resolution going forward not specify a time, say such time as the consensus of council might prescribe. So if it changes, we don't have to go back and have another formal vote, because we gave ourselves the discretion to set whatever date as a body we would like would probably make sense. And given, Ms. Wooten, the time frame you'd like us to work on, or the group task force to work on, that will increase the resource requirement from the staff, because they'll be meeting more often, and probably means dedicated staff on that compressed schedule. And we just need to be able to support that. But I'm happy to work with you on that, Ms. Wooten. I'm really good at project costing, and something I did for a living. But I know that's one of the third thing I think that we have to deliver, because that's what I think the city manager asked us to provide. Am I correct?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Wilson.
There's some really valid points that have been raised here, and John, you mentioned too, but we're asking people to come forward and to give their time. And if we want to have more diversity and more young people, a lot of them have jobs in the daytime. And they may not be able to take off work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to come and serve on this committee. So we kind of need to also have something to tell them when we're talking to them. Are these going to be evening meetings? Are they going to be afternoon meetings? What kind of a time frame? Because if they're committing their time, they need to know that as well. So I know it's maybe thinking kind of far out, but people are going to be giving their time, and they kind of need to know that. So would evening meetings be okay, Ms. Wooten?
I'm sorry, can I interject?
Sure.
For a second?
Sure.
Let's not,
I don't know
I don't want to get into the weeds of the meeting times that they're going to meet. They're going to have to decide what time they're actually going to meet. I think right now, if I'm understanding, the consensus on council, city attorney, is to suspend the board by 4 members. If Ms. Wooten is open, I understand she wants to take some time to look at that. But from understanding, is to suspend the council by 4, allow more input from or other people to get talent banks in, so we can look at that and then go forward from there. That is what I'm taking away from this.
So can we agree on that?
Yeah, I mean that's what I would like
Okay,
to
is everybody-
get this
everybody's
first
okay
step
with that,
to
Michael?
expand it by 4. If Ms. Wooten is agreeable
Okay.
to that.
Mr. Berlucci?
I don't have a problem
I'm
with
sorry.
with expanding it.
I'll yield to Councilmember Wooten.
I'm sorry, were
Yeah, I'd call on him, but go ahead.
okay, well, thank you, I apologize. I don't have a problem with expanding it. My concern is prolonging the process to June, when it should be starting in May. And the other concern is, because all this whole concern and whole process is not following the process. So what if we get to 15 and we still don't have the diversity that we have? Are we going to extend it to 20? So I think we really need to focus on, I have to go back to focus on what we're supposed to do. With 11 people, we can certainly, in the applications we have, we can take more applications in, But I think with 11 people, if we all support and appoint the right people, we can have what we need. We're at this position because we didn't follow the process and the guidelines like we should have. That's why we're here.
I disagree.
So, and you can disagree, that's fine. But this is my assessment, and this is my perspective. And again, if we go out and extend it to 14, and we still don't have that diversity because we're going, or a person's going to their friend or their whomever and asking them to put in applications, that's going to be a problem, and we're still not going to have what we need. So I think we really should look at what we have these applications come in, go back to the drawing board, and come out with a more inclusive group. I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, Mr. Bellucci.
Well, thank you. I was just going to take the opportunity to respond to Councilmember Wilson's point, and I think that Councilmember Rouse and Councilmember Wilson both made very valid points on the same issue, which is, on one hand, we don't want to get in the weeds of managing the committee, and I certainly agree with that. But on the other hand, I think what Councilmember Wilson was saying, that if we're going to make the committee accessible and inclusive and diverse, that we really need to make sure that we're able to communicate with confidence that people, especially young people with jobs, have a chance to participate. And frankly, if I had to have that conversation today, I wouldn't be able to convey that position. And that has come up in some of the conversations I had. When is the commission going to meet? I've got to work. I'm not sure if my schedule will permit. So I think especially if we're thinking about including young people, that's really something that it's not necessarily, we don't need to include in the ordinance. I wouldn't think that they would be meeting at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, but I think we would definitely want to convey our preference that the meetings occur at a time when young people have a chance to participate. But not just young people, also other people with jobs or other family and other obligations. So I think that's important. But I also want to make the point, just in response, I'm just a little confused because, as we're considering what appointments to make for this task force, which is important. We've all acknowledged that. We're using words like make the right appointments. I don't know, what does that mean? I'm confused exactly what that means. What does the right appointment means? And that means something different for every person. And I think we need to be careful about using that kind of language because it appears to possibly carry a bias with it. And that really speaks to the other issue. I think everyone on this council and everyone in the community who's involved in this conversation wants the same thing. And I talked a little bit about that at the last meeting. We want to have safe, equal, peaceful communities where we can have confidence that there's trust, respect, and accountability across the board. And as a result, these conversations can be difficult because they include questions about race, they include questions about historical tensions, and we've got to rise to the challenge to have these conversations honestly and candidly and directly, and sometimes that means, having uncomfortable dialogues. But that's our responsibility, and that's our privilege, really, as members of this council, and it's something that I hope we can continue to rise to that challenge and do so productively, and really serve the interests of the people of Virginia Beach.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Ms.
Yeah.
Wilson.
Let me say this. In terms of the right appointments, let me be specific. In the right appointments, as I just stated, what we have now, there is an imbalance. You have more retired law enforcement or those with a legal background. So when I say something as it relates to the right appointments, I'm making sure we understand what we have is not sufficient. It's not fair. There's not a balance. In terms of getting young people and what time they can meet, listen, I was on a commission before, and there were several young people who showed up in the middle of the day, and they were consistent, and they added to the conversation. So that's not an issue. And I don't want to get in, I don't want to overcomplicate things, and this is what we're doing. So for these reasons, I don't want to increase the list to four more people, because we're overcomplicating things, and I don't want to do that. My suggestion would be we stick with the 11 we have. We can ask for more applications and revisit the list that we have appointed and make those appointments again to be reflective of what we're stating here today, because we're overcomplicating this, and I don't want to do that.
Just if I could.
Okay, Mr. Moss.
I appreciate all that, but just while supportive as I was to expanding it, I am not, for the reasons that Mr. Bellucci said more eloquently than I could, I'm not wanting to revisit how we got to the 11. And so that's my way of uncomplicating it, is just to have the vote on the 18th and let the votes fall where they may.
Okay. All right, do we have a direction now? So, we'll ask, hopefully a draft resolution to expand and also include the, city manager's request for logistical support. It'll take a bit, but we'll get it right.
No, that's not what I because we've overcomplicated this issue, I don't think it's a good idea to go down that road. I'm going to hold fast to what we have. I'm going to trust this process. I'm going to go back out, ask for more applications. When we get back together, look at what we have, revisit the list, and appoint and make appointments reflective of what we've already said here, to reflect diversity, different backgrounds, and so on. And as Mr. Moss mentioned, if there's not an agreement with what we have, let the vote fall where it may.
Okay, at this point, if it's okay, we'll just kind of, get some input from each thing. Okay, the question will be, do we increase 4 more to 15, yes or no? Mr. Bellucci?
No.
Okay. Mr. Tower?
No.
Ms. Wooten?
No.
No.
Yes.
No.
I'm okay either way, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm whew, scratching my head. I mean, really, I am, if Ms. Wooten is the sponsor of the original ordinance, if she doesn't want to expand it, I will be in support of that. I thought expanding it will encompass more perspectives and give us balance, bring balance to this panel. Also, I think as I stated earlier, and I think Councilmember Moss reiterated, is my biggest concern is credibility. I don't want this panel to not have a credibility that when it brings us whatever results that they may find or solution they come to, that the public will not trust it. That's my major concern. But if Ms. Wooten, the original sponsor of the bill, doesn't want to expand it, then no.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay, folks, I have to run. I have a family medical thing I have to deal with. I'm deferring over to Mr. Wood. Thank you all very much.
Meeting is adjourned, and we'll reconvene in public dialogue when we get the all clear.